The United Nations says the war in Ukraine could worsen a global food crisis, leading to mass hunger and famine lasting for years. Speaking at a major UN summit in New York, Secretary-General Antonio Guterres said Russia's invasion of Ukraine was the latest factor driving global food insecurity on top of the pandemic and global warming. Guterres said he was in intense contact with Russia and other countries to address the situation.
There is no effective solution to the food crisis without reintegrating Ukraine's food production, as well as the food and fertilizer produced by Russia and Belarus, into world markets despite the war. Russia must permit the safe and secure export of grain stored in Ukrainian ports. Alternative transportation routes can be explored, even if we know that by itself they will not be enough to solve the problem. And Russian food and fertilizers must have unrestricted access to world markets without indirect impediments.
All right, let's bring in Max Zander, who is in Kyiv. Max, give us a sense of how important Ukraine is in the global food supply chain.
It is of huge importance. Let me tell you that Ukraine has been dubbed the breadbasket of Europe. So it's one of the largest producers and exporters of agricultural exports such as wheat or sunflower oil and corn. In 2020 alone, Ukraine was the fifth largest exporter of wheat in the entire world. So this has significant consequences for the global food supply chains, and also a lot of the humanitarian aid to some of the poorest countries in Africa and in the Middle East comes from Ukraine, so also huge implications here.
So what effect has the war had on food production and exports?
Right, so some of the farmers were conscripted into military service. Some of the farms couldn't operate due to fighting. The Russians are still targeting agricultural production, such as silos and storages. But that being said, Ukraine produces much more agricultural products than it can consume domestically. And a lot of this stuff is actually stuck in the country right now, cannot be exported. Usually a lot of it would leave by sea, but the Russians control the Sea of Azov in the east, and the port of Odessa in the west is being blocked. So at the moment there are roughly 90 million tons of agricultural exports waiting to leave the country, and Ukraine is losing roughly $170 million a day.
Clearly a massive impact. So what's being done to address these issues?
Right, so the UN is negotiating with Russia and other key players such as Turkey, but there's very little information coming out of these talks at the moment. The EU is trying to help, trying to pitch in, trying to find alternative routes at the moment. So one option could be the smaller river ports, Danube River Port, for example, close to Odessa, but that is nowhere near the capacity of the seaports. So the most likely option, or the option that's being used at the moment, is exporting by trains, so loading on trains, cargo trains, and sending the wheat and other exports across the borders into Poland, into Slovakia, into Romania, and to the respective ports there. But there are also some obstacles there in the way because the train system is not compatible between Ukraine and some of the Eastern European countries. So this also creates some holdups. So it's a lot less than actually could be exported through the ports.
All right, Max Zander reporting from Kyiv. Thanks so much. Now, as we've been hearing, the war has drastically hampered exports via the Black Sea and is exacerbating the global food security crisis. So now the Romanian port of Constanza has become a vital hub for grain shipments. DW's Jack Parrock reports now on the challenges that it's facing.
This Ukrainian corn would never have been here at the port of Constanza before Russia's invasion. It would have been shipped out of the now closed port of Odessa, 250 kilometres up the Black Sea coast. It's good for business for the operators here, but there are concerns about capacity.
The next 3 weeks, the Romanian crop will start to come in the port of Constanza. We are confident that we can manage also the Romanian quantity and the Ukrainian quantity of grains. We can manage to send them to the ship. But of course, we cannot stop Romanian harvest for the Ukrainian corn.
Once this vessel leaves port, 210,000 tonnes of Ukrainian corn will have been shipped out since the start of April. But that's just 1% of the 20 million tonnes of grain that needs to be shifted in the next 3 months before these Ukrainian fields are harvested to avoid major bottlenecks which could cause it to rot.
Pretty much all of the corn that's coming into the port of Constanza is from Ukraine at the moment. This boat is headed from here, though, to Rotterdam.
But many of the vessels go to North Africa and the Middle East, and there are real fears of an increase in food shortages and famine if supply bottlenecks arise. The Port Authority says it's doing everything it can.
We don't have other choice. What if I screaming and I hear everywhere? It's very easy to scream. I cannot do nothing. It's okay. It's hard time. Everybody, this is a special situation, and everybody must accommodate to this situation, find solution.
Constanza port has another problem though. 700 of these wagons lay rusting on the port's underused train lines, held in judicial limbo following legal battles between state and private entities. The country's transport minister says a new €40 million project will renovate 95 Romanian train lines before the end of the year, partly to make switching wheels to accommodate trains arriving from the east, which use wider tracks.
For 30 or 40 years, these tracks were abandoned. So now we invest in Galați in order to modernize this line, the Soviet type of lines, and to come directly in the harbor.
This really is a graveyard of these old cargo carriages right now. We're a few hundred meters away from the port of Constanza. And the plan is that this won't only support with the Ukrainian shipments that are coming in, but also that it will help rejuvenate this area for the future.
But in the short term, Europe's approaching summer will only mean more grains coming in. And with no end to the war in sight, pressure on the infrastructure here in Constanza is only set to pile on.